A man stands on a mountain wrapped in thick, black smoke, and he is holding a set of instructions. And the people it protects, you start to see something the weapon theory completely misses. The Ark of the Covenant is not a weapon of war. And now, David is carrying that gravity the way it was designed to be carried, yielding to its weight, honoring its mass. The poles dig into their shoulders, and the city rejoices. The blood stains the dust, and the king spins in the street. The weight of heaven is carried up the hill, and the gates of Zion open wide. David brings the heavy chest into the city and places it inside a tent. The presence of God is finally resting in the center of Israel's capital, but a tent made of skins and fabric is temporary. His son Solomon will spend 7 years building a permanent house of cedar and stone to hold the massive weight of this box. And when that temple is finally finished, the kavod is going to fall so heavy that the priests will not even be able to stand up to do their jobs. We love the idea of a permanent address for God. We want a location we can visit on our terms. We want a building we can manage. We want a deity we can contain. When Solomon finishes the temple, he builds a masterpiece of containment. He spends 7 years cutting massive limestone blocks. He hauls fragrant cedar logs from the mountains of Lebanon. He overlays the inner walls with pure, blinding gold. It is the heartbeat of an exiled God. This isn't just ancient trivia. We are drawn to power. He is doing what every king in the ancient world does. He is building a permanent house for his national deity. The priests carry the wooden chest into the windowless room. They set the poles down on the cold stone floor. They walk out into the bright sunlight. Then, the architecture is violently interrupted. A thick, black cloud floods the inner sanctuary. The smoke pours through the heavy wooden doors. The atmosphere grows dense. The air grows heavy. The priests collapse on the stone pavement. They cannot stand up to perform their assigned rituals. The weight of the kavod completely crushes their schedule. This is not a polite ribbon-cutting ceremony. It is a hostile takeover of a human institution. God accepts the building, but he sets a terrifying boundary. You can build the house. You can carve the cedar. You can burn the incense, but you do not manage the resident. For the next 400 years, the ark sits in absolute darkness. It sits behind a heavy woven curtain. It sits in a room with no windows. It sits in a room with no lamps. Once a year, one man enters the room. The high priest walks in barefoot. He carries a bowl of warm blood. He carries a pan of burning, smoking incense. He sprinkles the blood in the pitch black. He backs out of the room, trembling. The gold chest remains hidden in the dark. We want a God who functions like a tool we can wield, a force we can summon to secure our own borders and crush our own enemies. But a static box is a vulnerable box. When you lock the Creator in a dark room, you start to forget his voice. When the presence of God is localized, human nature takes over. We stop seeking a relationship. We start relying on geography. The prophets scream in the streets about justice and mercy. The people ignore them because they have the ark. They believe the gold box is an insurance policy. They believe God will never allow his own house to be destroyed. They are making the exact same mistake their ancestors made at Aphek. The ark is not a battery that powers their empire. It is a covenant that demands their fidelity, and they have broken that covenant entirely. The Babylonian army is marching toward the city. The siege ramps are already being built. The cedar walls are about to burn to the ground, and when the smoke finally clears over the ruins of Jerusalem, the most important object in human history will simply be gone. The battering rams shatter the heavy wooden gates. The year is 586 BC. Babylonian soldiers flood into the holy city, their bronze armor reflecting the orange glow of burning cedar. They carry heavy iron axes and hammers into the Temple of Solomon. They smash the massive bronze basin. We want to manage the sacred, but the story of the ark is diagnosing a disease we still carry. They melt down the gold lampstands. They systematically dismantle 4 centuries of sacred architecture, loading the wealth of Jerusalem onto wooden carts. We have the receipts of this destruction. The biblical texts provide a meticulous, exhaustive inventory of every single item the Babylonians haul away. They list the spoons. They list the fire pans. They list the intricate carvings on the bronze pillars. But the Ark of the Covenant is not on the list. It is simply gone. No mention of its destruction. No record of its capture. No footnote about frantic priests smuggling it away into the desert night to hide it in a mountain cave. It vanishes from the biblical narrative in complete silence, sparking thousands of years of conspiracy theories, treasure hunts, and cinematic blockbusters. But while the ashes of the temple are still smoldering, a prophet named Jeremiah stands in the rubble and delivers a message that makes absolutely no sense to a grieving people. He tells them that one day, they will not even remember the gold chest. In Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 16, God speaks through the prophet and says, "They shall no longer say, 'The Ark of the Covenant of the Lord,' it shall not come to mind. They shall not remember it. They shall not miss it, nor shall it be made again." This is a staggering statement to make to an exiled nation. To tell an ancient Israelite they will not miss the Ark. It shows us what happens when you try to harness the creator of the universe like a utility. Is like telling a modern human they will not miss the sun. The chest was the literal, physical anchor of their entire religious and political universe. But Jeremiah sees what the Babylonian army cannot see. The disappearance of the Ark is not a tragic historical accident. It is a divine geographical expansion. The physical box was always meant to be a temporary container. It was designed to localize the unapproachable weight of the Creator, only until that presence could be poured out on humanity itself. You do not remake the wooden box when the reality it pointed to is about to break out of the room entirely. But the people of Israel cannot see that far ahead. When they finally return from their exile 70 years later, they rebuild the stone walls of the temple, restoring the sacrificial system exactly as it was commanded in the desert. But when they walk into the newly constructed inner sanctuary, they have to face a devastating architectural problem. They rebuild the stone walls. They weave the heavy curtain. They slaughter the lambs. But the center is missing. When the high priest walks into the newly constructed Holy of Holies in the Second Temple, he finds a void for 500 years during the entire lifetime of Jesus. The most sacred room on earth is completely, terrifyingly empty. To feel the weight of this story, you have to start in the dust of the Sinai desert. The Israelites have just walked out of Egypt. There is no gold chest. There are no wooden poles. There is only a bare piece of exposed bedrock on the floor. Generations are born and die. Empires rise and fall. The Greeks march in. The Romans march in. Herod expands the temple into a massive, glittering complex of white marble and gold. It becomes the architectural marvel of the ancient world. But behind the heavy veil, the core is still hollow. To understand the weight of this void, you have to look at the lid of the lost box. Back in Exodus 25, God gives Moses the blueprint for a heavy slab of solid gold that sits on top of the ark. Our English Bibles call it the mercy seat. It is where the presence of God is said to rest between two carved cherubim, but the word translated mercy seat is the Hebrew kaparet. It comes from the root verb kafar. It does not mean mercy. It does not mean a chair. It means to cover, to wipe clean, to smear. It is the exact same root word used in Genesis chapter 6, when God tells Noah to coat the wooden ark with pitch to seal out the violent floodwaters. Kapar, to cover completely, on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Carrying that exact same root word, the high priest took warm blood and smeared it on this gold lid. The tablets of the broken law sat inside the box. They are surrounded by sand that burns through their sandals. Eating unleavened bread, staring up at a pillar of fire in the freezing desert night, crying out for justice. The presence of a holy God hovered above the box, demanding perfection, and between the two was the kaparet, coated in blood. He was covering the broken law with the life of a substitute. That root changes everything. The kaparet was not a piece of divine furniture. It was the physical location where the debt of human failure was canceled. But now, the gold lid is gone. The blood has nowhere to land. The high priest walks into the dark, surrounded by the smell of burning incense. He sprinkles the blood on the cold, bare stone. He walks back out, year after year, century after century. An empty room, a missing lid, an unfinished transaction. They are carrying out the ritual, waiting for the real Kaparet to finally appear and finish the work. And decades later, an exiled fisherman, sitting in a dark cave on a Roman prison island, looks up into the sky, and he sees the impossible. The Aegean Sea crashes violently against the jagged black rocks of Patmos. The salt spray hangs thick and cold in the air. An old man named John sits alone in exile on this Roman prison island. He is the last surviving disciple. His skin is weathered by the sun, his body confined by the heavy, rust-covered iron of the empire. They are a scattered, traumatized mob of former slaves. They have seen the plagues. They have walked through the divided sea. He is living in a world that feels completely, terrifyingly severed from the promises of God. It is the end of the 1st century. The Roman legions have already marched on Jerusalem. They have torn the massive limestone blocks of the Second Temple to the ground, setting the cedar on fire and carrying the golden lampstands back to Rome as trophies. The empty room is gone. The missing box has been lost to history for over 600 years. But then, Revelation chapter 11 says the sky rips open. John looks up. He hears deafening thunder. He sees lightning fracture the sky, illuminating the dark cave, and the stone ground beneath his feet begins to violently shake with a massive earthquake. He is looking directly into the command center of the universe. He sees the true temple in heaven thrown wide open, and right in the center of the blinding light, John sees it, the Ark of his Covenant. For the first time in 6 centuries, the gold chest appears in the biblical narrative, but it is not sitting in a dark, windowless room behind a heavy woven curtain. It is exposed. It is visible. The doors are thrown wide open for the entire cosmos to see. This vision is not a historical recovery mission. It is a cosmic relocation. But now they are wandering in a wasteland, terrified, exposed, and complaining about the lack of water. And here, God does not give them a weapon. John is not looking at the physical acacia wood box built in the Sinai desert. The wood and gold were always just a shadow. They were a localized, temporary architectural model of a reality that is now breaking completely into the human timeline. The true Ark, the unshielded, unfiltered presence of the Creator is no longer contained in a building managed by human priests. The Kaparet, the ultimate covering for human failure, was permanently satisfied outside the city walls on a wooden Roman cross. When that substitute bled, the thick, heavy veil of the temple was torn perfectly in half from top to bottom. God has left the room. He is no longer a localized deity you have to travel to Jerusalem to find. The heavy, crushing weight of his kavod has been poured out entirely, and when you finally realize where that presence actually resides today, it changes how you walk through every single season of your life. A gold-plated chest was carried into a flooded river, and the violent waters stopped in their tracks. A gold-plated chest was marched around an enemy city, and the massive stone walls crumbled to dust. A gold-plated chest was locked inside a pagan temple, and a foreign god fell headless on the threshold. To conquer the desert, he gives them a blueprint to build a chest. Acacia wood, overlaid with pure gold, inside and out. A gold-plated chest was touched by an unshielded hand, and the crushing weight of heaven stopped a human heart. A gold-plated chest was hauled up the hill of Zion, and a warrior king danced in the streets with absolute abandon. A gold-plated chest was placed in a dark, windowless room, and the heavy smoke of God's presence drove the priests to the floor. And an exiled prophet saw the true temple open in the sky, and the localized presence of God broke out to become the lifeblood of the world. Same covenant, same gravity, same God. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the bare bedrock. 500 years of high priests walking into the dark, carrying a bowl of warm blood, and sprinkling it on a cold, empty stone floor where the ark used to be. A silent room, an unfinished transaction. They were standing in the void, waiting for a Kaparet that wasn't there yet, trusting that God had not abandoned them, but was simply preparing the final payment. If you are in a season where it feels like you are walking into an empty room, if you are doing all the right things, praying the right prayers, but the presence of God feels localized somewhere you cannot reach. The story of the ark is a reminder that God's silence is often the preparation. The rock beneath his sandals is vibrating with a frequency that rattles his teeth. He is not designing a palace, 2.5 cubits long, a cubit and a half wide, rings of gold on the corners, poles of wood to carry it, for his expansion. He refuses to be contained in a box. He refuses to be managed in a building. The physical covering disappeared because the final substitute bled. And the heavy veil of the temple was torn in half. You do not have to travel to Jerusalem to find the gravity of God. You do not have to stand outside a dark room hoping you are clean enough to survive the proximity. The room is empty because the presence is here. And may the God who refused to be contained by a cedar room pour out his unshielded presence into your life, exactly where you are standing today. And inside the box, the stone tablets, the testimony, the terms of the covenant, the physical proof that the God who shattered the Egyptian empire actually wants to live in the center of their camp. The mountain is still smoking when the craftsmen start hammering the gold. This is the birthplace of the ark. It is built to be carried. It is built for a people on the move. But the moment they pick up the poles to march toward the promised land, they are about to learn a terrifying lesson about what exactly they are carrying. Because the first obstacle in their path is not an army. It is a river at flood stage. To understand what happens at the edge of the Jordan River, you have to look at the name of the object itself. In the book of Joshua, chapter 3, it is springtime. The snows of Mount Hermon have melted, and the Jordan is a muddy, violent torrent overflowing its banks. The Israelites are standing on the edge of the water, looking at the promised land they cannot reach. God does not tell them to build boats or bridges. He tells the priests to pick up the wooden chest, walk down the bank, and step into the roaring current. He is not building a monument to a human king. He is measuring wood and gold for a box. In our English Bibles, this object is called the Ark of the Covenant. But the word translated ark here is the Hebrew Aran. It appears hundreds of times in the Old Testament, and its meaning is strikingly ordinary. Aran simply means a chest, a box, a gathering container. You could keep money in an Aran. You could keep scrolls in it. But the detail that changes how you read the Jordan crossing is where this exact word appears right before the Exodus begins. The very last verse of Genesis, chapter 50, verse 26, describes the death of Joseph in Egypt. He is embalmed and placed in an Aran, a coffin, a box for the dead. That root changes everything. For 400 years in Egyptian slavery, the only Aran the Israelites knew was a box that held the bones of their ancestors. It was the ultimate symbol of human limitation and exile. But now, God takes the container of death and repurposes it to hold the living, breathing reality of his covenant. The priests carry this chest down the bank. The moment the soles of their feet touch the freezing, rushing water, the river stops. The waters pile up in a heap miles upstream. The priests stand on dry, cracked mud in the middle of the riverbed, while an entire nation crosses over. Then comes Jericho. It will become the most lethal and coveted object in human history. It will march ahead of ragged armies and stop the violent flow of rivers. They do not draw swords or build siege ramps. They simply march the Aran around massive stone walls for 7 days, blowing the deafening blast of ram's horns, until the walls collapse in a blinding cloud of dust. The Aran is not a magic wand they wave to manipulate nature. It is the physical boundary of God's jurisdiction, where the chest goes. The rules of the Creator apply. Water has to stop. Stone has to fall, because the earth recognizes the presence of its maker. But this unbroken string of victories creates a dangerous psychological shift. Because when you carry the presence of God and win every time, it is very easy to forget who is actually leading whom. The Israelites begin to assume the box answers to them. And a few generations later, that assumption will get 30. 0, 0, 0. Men killed before the sun goes down. Swords clash at Aphek. Blood soaks the dirt. Israel is breaking. The sweat stings their eyes. The Philistine weapons are too heavy. The Israelites are desperate for a miracle. They do not pray. They do not repent. They send for the box. They march the gold-plated chest onto the battlefield. The Israelite army lets out a shout so loud the earth literally trembles beneath their feet. The Philistines hear the roar. They panic. They know the stories of Egypt. They know the stories of the divided sea. But the Philistines fight anyway. It will topple foreign gods in the dark of closed temples. It will kill men who reach out a hand to steady it. And the unthinkable happens. Israel is slaughtered. 30,000 men fall in the dust. The priests carrying the poles are killed. And the Ark of God is captured. A messenger runs back to the city with torn clothes and dirt on his head. When the old priest Eli hears the news, he falls backward out of his chair and breaks his neck. The Israelites made a fatal miscalculation. They treated the presence of God like a lucky rabbit's foot. The ark is not a magic charm you pull out when you are losing. It is the footstool of a king who refuses to be manipulated. The Philistines drag their ultimate prize back to the city of Ashdod. They carry the heavy chest into the dark, incense-filled temple of Dagon. Dagon is their chief deity. He is a god of grain and storm. They place the ark beside the towering statue of Dagon as a trophy of war. A prisoner of the Philistine pantheon. They lock the heavy wooden doors. The sun rises. The priests of Dagon unlock the doors. Dagon is face down on the cold stone floor. They pick him up. They dust him off. They prop him back on his pedestal. The next morning, they open the doors again. Dagon is face down again. But this time, his head and his hands are snapped off. They are lying completely severed on the threshold. Only his torso remains. And then, after centuries of defining the center of the ancient world, it will vanish without a single trace. The prisoner has dismantled the warden. God does not need an army to defend his honor. He is perfectly capable of clearing his own room. Panic sweeps through Ashdod. A horrific plague of tumors breaks out. Screams echo in the streets. The Philistines scramble to get rid of the box. They move it to Gath. Gath breaks out in tumors. They move it to Ekron. The people of Ekron see it coming and beg their leaders to send it away. The greatest military prize in Philistine history has become a radioactive nightmare. They finally load the gold chest onto a wooden cart. They hitch it to 2 milk cows. They let it wander away into the hills, watching it disappear, terrified of what it will do next. But the danger is not just for the pagans, because when the ark finally crosses back into Israelite territory, a man named Uzzah is waiting. We tend to think of holiness as a moral category. We assume it means having good behavior, maintaining a pure mind, or keeping quiet in a sanctuary. But the biblical authors understood holiness as something far more dangerous. They understood it as an objective, physical property, a raw, unshielded weight of pure existence. It is not a character trait, it is a live wire. Same gold-plated chest, same trail of devastation and deliverance, same object. Again and again, most people assume the Ark of the Covenant was a weapon. When King David finally decides to bring the Ark of the Covenant up to his new capital in Jerusalem, he forgets this reality completely. He builds a brand new wooden cart, hitches it to a team of heavy oxen, and loads the gold chest on top. He borrows a Philistine transport method to move a Hebrew reality. The cart hits a deep rut in the road. The oxen stumble. The heavy chest tilts toward the ground. A man named Uzzah sees the gold box tipping, and he reaches out a bare hand to steady it. The moment his fingers make contact with the wood, his heart stops, and he drops dead in the dirt. It is one of the most disturbing scenes in the entire Hebrew Bible. We read it, and we instinctively recoil, because we think God is being erratic, petty, or cruel. Uzzah was just trying to help. He was trying to protect the sacred object from hitting the mud. But Uzzah made a lethal theological miscalculation. He assumed his own hands were cleaner than the dirt. So, David abandons the ark in the hill country. He leaves it at the house of a man named Obed-Edom, terrified of the God he is attempting to worship, because the death of Uzzah is not a flash of divine temper. It is the uncompromising physics of holiness, a divine battery of raw, uncontrollable power, a sacred bomb you carry into battle to guarantee victory. And it does carry a lethal weight. God had given exact, unbending instructions in the desert smoke for a reason. The ark was designed with gold rings and wooden poles, so that it could be carried on the shoulders of consecrated priests. To touch the box directly is to invite the infinite into unmediated contact with the finite. And the finite shatters. David spends 3 months sitting in Jerusalem, rereading the ancient blueprints, realizing you cannot treat the creator of the universe like cargo, but he cannot leave the presence of God in the hills forever. The next time he goes to get it, the cart is gone, and the king is on foot. The Levites slide the long wooden poles through the solid gold rings. The wood rests on human shoulders, digging into muscle and bone. They take 1 step. They take 2 steps. 6 steps. Then, they stop. Blood spills on the dust. David sacrifices a bull and a fattened calf right there on the road. And then the noise begins. Not a polite, orderly choir. Ram's horns blasting. Bronze cymbals crashing. Shouting that shakes the limestone hills of Jerusalem. And David, the warrior king, strips off his heavy royal armor and dances with absolute abandon in a simple linen ephod. To understand this violent collision of extreme reverence and wild joy, but if you look closer at the exact measurements dictated in the smoke, at the places this chest travels, at the people it strikes down, you have to understand the specific word the ancient texts use to describe what is actually riding on those poles. Go back for a second to the day the Philistines captured the ark. When Eli the priest fell out of his chair and died, his daughter-in-law was going into labor, and with her dying breath, 1 Samuel chapter 4, verse 21 says, she named her son Ichabod. She named him that because, she said, the glory has departed from Israel. The word our English Bibles translate as glory in that verse, and throughout the story of the ark, is the Hebrew kavod. It appears hundreds of times in the Old Testament, and its root is the verb kavod, which literally means to be heavy, to be weighty. When we hear the word glory, we think of something shiny, a bright light, a golden halo floating over a religious painting. But to the ancient Hebrew mind, kavod was not about illumination. It was about mass. It was the sheer, crushing gravity of a person's substance, their wealth, their undeniable importance. That root changes everything. It explains Uzzah. When you touch the raw, unshielded gravity of the Creator, you are crushed under the weight of his kavod. Glory is not a bright light that makes you squint. It is a gravity that pulls you into its orbit.